I hope you stick around for this video. There's a number of people that I've known for many years, and I've got a guest here that I've known a long time. And he's running a company now that's doing cloud security, I think in a very revolutionary way. So stick around if you're interested in cloud, if you run enterprise, if you're a CISO, if you do this kind of work, then stick around, you're going to learn something today. So I hope you stay with us. Hi, this is Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with a good friend of mine, Brendan Hannigan. I've known him for many years. He's the CEO and co-founder of a security company called Sonrai, and we're going to talk about cloud, we're going to talk about trends, we'll probably even talk a little bit about the old times. So I hope you'll join me in welcoming Brendan. Welcome
Great
to
see you this
office.
morning.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
It is exciting to see you running this new company. Tell us a little bit about it quickly, and then we'll get into tech and cloud trends. And so, what are you guys doing over at the company?
Our company helps enterprises secure their usage of public cloud, so very specific AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and other similar cloud infrastructures. We have a beautiful way of monitoring what's happening in that environment, finding risks, of which there are many across a whole domain of technologies, helping our customers automatically eliminate them, and then continuously monitoring them to make sure they never come back, and then for any security violations and unusual activity in the usage of these public cloud environments.
And your customers are enterprise teams?
We very much have a grouping of very large enterprises and commercial enterprises. That's typically who we go for. And actually there's an important distinction there, because there's a difference between an enterprise and a company like my own, actually, where we have a single team, a single app, and yes, we're agile. Enterprises have a unique set of problems, and we're focused on those problems.
And it's something you've been looking at for a very long time.
Oh, it is. You know what, Ed? It's actually, as you know, we've known each other in the security industry for a long time. And I actually, after I had sold a company to IBM, the Q1 Labs and the security intelligence company, and I ran IBM Security for a number of years. But actually, I came to the conclusion that, cloud and the new ways of developing applications we know it's not new, it's transforming how people build technology and build value. And yet, security hasn't transformed itself. And so my belief was, all feet in the future will be in cloud. And in fact, actually, I argue all the time, people shouldn't be cautious about going to cloud for security reasons. They should run to the cloud for security reasons. It is the innovation that will change the arc of all of these challenges which we see in enterprises. Cloud is it, but it has to be done well.
You shared with me earlier, I wanted you to share with the folks watching, these 3 themes that were important as you developed the company. I thought they were awesome. Why don't you take us through those? They're really quite good.
So a lot of the times people think cloud is just another thing to be secured. You know what? We've next generation firewall, and we've got endpoints and EDRs, and then we've this thing called cloud. They're dead wrong. Cloud and the way in which technology ends up in cloud, and the way in which we build value on cloud, is dramatically different than anything we've done before. Client server, mainframe, and how apps are built. What does that mean? It means that companies have to entirely transform how it is they're securing these environments. I'll give you some key examples. We used to develop applications in 18-month development cycles. Now actually we develop microservice applications, and we're dropping code every 2 weeks. They used to be monolithic, they're now microservices. We used to call up IT to reconfigure the firewall, set up the proxy, set up a virtual machine. No, infrastructure as code. We just do it like that. Security teams, by the way, don't know what's happening. And then it ends up in cloud. What does it mean? We have to look at how teams are involved in securing this, the underlying technology foundations, and the processes to security. It's entirely new, and that's actually just a critical thing that people have to understand.
That's a big transformation, and whenever you see that in cybersecurity, it causes some upset because people make investments in older things.
Of course.
They have the big legacy thing. Are you seeing that? Like, is there a little bit of a bump as people take what they've got and maybe just try and force fit it into cloud or do some things?
There is an initial experience where companies may do lift and shift. In other words, they take cloud and they sort of turn it into a traditional data center. But then they don't get the value of cloud. The value of cloud is using the services, using the microservices, getting the innovation. It actually doesn't last long, Ed. A lot of banks actually start out that way. They basically turn AWS into a constrained data center. It doesn't last. Eventually, they have to just go all in and embrace it.
You shared with me the coolest insight into how security people and, say, DevOps teams are estimating the challenges.
Yeah.
It seems like they're in different sides of the spectrum there. Share that. I thought that was amazing.
I think actually, and it's not a knock, it's just a reality.
Yeah.
I think CISOs in general, traditional security teams, are grossly underestimating how different cloud is and the uniquenesses of the technology.
For both threat and compliance.
For
probably,
both,
right?
absolutely for both. The nature of the threat is going to be totally different in terms of how it expands and how people get a foothold in your cloud versus in a traditional data center, and actually how you actually even understand what the risk is. So that's on. I'll give you some technology examples of that. And then on the flip side of it is, on the DevOps side, they're grossly overestimating their ability to secure that infrastructure, because they believe, and we believe, we all do, of course we should shift left, of course we should do more in code, but then there's this sort of very somewhat naive belief, which is, well, everything is all checked into code, so as it's running into cloud, it must be perfect, which is absurd. It's like saying, I set up the firewall, I'm never going to check what's happening in my network anymore. So we have this tension. I think it's real, and I think it's a big challenge in terms of how customers get to the bottom of this. I'll give you just one example. In terms of CISOs underestimating it. There are 1,300 unique ways you can delete something in Amazon Web Services. And there are about 1,800 ways you can create things in Amazon Web Services. Now, Ed, you've been in the business a long time. How many CISOs do you know are saying, from a risk perspective, what are the mechanisms and who is allowed to do these things in their clouds? A very small number.
Yeah.
And yet that's where the risk is. The risk isn't in, I misconfigured my firewall. The risk is, did I give somebody a permission to do something? And one last example. There's a particular permission in Azure Cloud, and it allows you, if you have this permission, to connect a public endpoint, bypassing all controls, to an Azure volume on a VM. That's a very powerful permission. Who has that permission? That's where risk is in cloud. I don't think security buyers, our security practitioners, truly understand how different it is.
Does your team work to try to bring these groups together? Like
we do.
DevOps
I mean, the reality is there's always this. I say, actually, there's a previous company, which I know you're familiar with, Q1 Labs, we built. And at that time, the CISO wasn't as powerful as the CISO is now, actually, and wasn't as established. And so we used to sell to network and security teams. And we used to always say, go to network, go security. Today, with Sonrai Security, we go security, cloud, security, cloud. You have to be with both. Because if they don't both appreciate what has to be done, then there's just too many barriers to adoption and to getting it right.
Now, you have some strong views around existing pillars and how they're changing. That's probably a very key component as you built the company. Talk to me about that, because that's a big jolt for companies.
It is a jolt, and actually, because we have to remember that the security pillars upon which we build our security foundation of a business, and the technology pillars are things which have been built up over, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, right? In a traditional data center client-server architecture. So what are examples of some of those pillars? Next generation firewalls. My company is, mostly in AWS. We've got also infrastructure in Azure. We don't own a firewall. You probably don't own a firewall. Probably never will own a firewall. It's not one of the pillars of the future. The second example is the Security Operations Center, the beautiful fusion centers that we would see around here in downtown Manhattan. They're all built around understanding and analyzing information coming from those data centers and the devices in them. They're very oriented around looking at threats from an IP address. Totally useless in cloud. Those fusion centers will not work well when the entire infrastructure is in cloud. It won't work. So what are the new pillars? And of course there's other pillars like the traditional people-focused identity and governance pieces. Cloud is like a new universe. It's not a new pillar. It's like a new universe. And in it, a lot of technology has been subsumed by the cloud service provider. I don't have to worry about distributed denial of service attacks. I can purchase a service to help me manage that, the network-focused things. Right. So we believe there's 4 critical pillars, and those pillars are, of course, the cloud platform itself, and have I set it up properly, and what are the threats which I see? The second one is really, really, really important, identity risk. And identity is about non-people identities. The third one is security buyers typically have sort of our security people have looked at data and they've looked at their data center. You can almost hug your Oracle servers. In cloud, you can't. So data is a pillar. Where is it? Who has access to it? And then the last one, of course, is the workload itself. The workload's different. It's not just a virtual machine. It could be a serverless function, which comes up, on average, they last about 60 seconds to 90 seconds. And when it comes up, during that 90 seconds, it could get access to critical data. And the question is, from a compliance and security perspective, did it?
Yeah.
Did it? And what should it?
So one thing we got excited about when we looked at your platform is, I'll take those 4 pillars.
Yeah.
What a CISO would be doing today
Yeah.
would be using cloud security posture management tools for their platform, using like that KIM model we saw for, say, identity, using cloud DLP for data, and using these workload protection tools, CWPP or whatever.
Yes.
Like a whole host of different things.
Got the
I looked
acronyms
at what you're doing, and you guys do all of that, and I went, wow,
Yeah.
that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
How did you do that? How'd you get all that stuff into the platform?
So it's actually an interesting, so we started out with this strategy. I call it like we build our platform from the engine room out.
Yeah.
And the foundational belief is when you build a platform, it's not that any of those 4 things you described, which have their separate acronyms, customers aren't asking for those things to be separated, but that's how the market has kind of built out different functions, and it's very common. Our belief is at the foundation, we have to be able to see everything in cloud, which means there's different techniques for gathering information.
Yeah.
One gives us a view into workload, one gives us a view into activity. But ultimately, Ed, we built, at the foundation of our solution and approach is this graphing engine, which is magically possible in cloud. It's much deeper than anybody else has in the world. It finds things that nobody else in the world can find. And why do we do that? It's because the complexity of the identity, the network setups, the ways microservices applications can mesh together is extraordinarily complex for a human brain to comprehend. We can graph it and give very
This is your identity graph?
The identity
Right.
graph, exactly. Then that's the foundation upon which we build these other pillars. So why do we do it? The graph gives us the ability to find things that are impossible for a team to find alone, and actually impossible to have if you don't have that graph. And then by having the graph, we can inform operationally what somebody should do. Simple example. You have, at any point in time, thousands of vulnerabilities which should be fixed. We can tell you the exact one that you should fix right now based on the ability, if it was to be exploited, to escalate privilege, to get access to production environment, to get access to sensitive data. That's built upon the graph. So that's why we do the pillar. That's why we have these functions, but they're built on a common foundation, and that's what nobody else has done.
That is the way to do it, right? You build the foundation, then it becomes a platform.
Is.
You can do all kinds of crazy
There's
stuff.
no other.
on
There's
top of
no
it.
shortcuts. I mean, we don't believe there's a shortcut, and you just have little. There's this tendency sometimes is people want, let's just get everything done quickly, and we just have lots of widgets tied together. There are no shortcuts for enterprise security.
Yeah.
There just aren't. And so what's the foundation? See everything. Graph everything. Now, if that's your foundation, now I can build the functionality on top of it. Where's my risk here? Where's my risk with this team? Where's my risk with that app? That's ultimately the way. There's no other way to do it.
I want to ask you about the different cloud services that you deal with. A lot of our enterprise customers tell us, wow, it's inconvenient. They're all different. The nomenclature is different. Is that a pain in the neck to deal with that as a security vendor? Because they do similar things. They call them different things.
Yes.
The APIs are a little different.
Very different.
It's got to be frustrating that there's really no commonality.
Well, I'll give it to you in numbers, right? We measure 35,000 unique permissions that are possible to be set in the identity and access management models across Amazon, Microsoft, and Google.
Just because of the options.
Just the options, the services, the mesh of services. And there's about 20 being added every day. Now, for us, we actually have an automated way to track it, automatically classify it, and automatically put in our rules. But just imagine, you're a customer. How can you keep track of that? And the answer is, you can't. However, it's possible, this is the beauty of cloud, it's possible to leverage the power of cloud to deliver a level of automation analytics That really has never been possible before. That's what's amazing. So I think the clouds invariably are always going to be very different. That's just not going to change. And also companies will try to standardize upon one cloud provider, and they will have mostly one cloud provider, but they will never just have one cloud because they're going to buy a company, they're going to buy another company, and what they'll find is it's going to be hard to get those teams to move off of that cloud. We have very few companies who are just in one cloud.
Do you find that you sell more to the security team or the DevOps team, or kind of both?
So just think of the type of customers we spoke of at the start, and you'd be well familiar with them, from your own personal experiences. So I like to say there's buyers and stakeholders. And so buyers are the security team, the cloud team. Now, let me just get specific on the cloud team. In the old days, we had an enterprise network and data center team, large, managing the infrastructure. I believe in the end, there's a future infrastructure. And what is that? It's 150 AWS accounts and 50 Azure subscriptions and 4 Google projects. Now, this is the difference between an enterprise and a SaaS company. There could be 40 teams using that, and they all are kind of standardized, but they're never totally standardized. You know that. Right. Somebody has to vouch for that infrastructure. We sell to the team, the Cloud Center of Excellence, the group of people who are responsible for getting some consistency and reporting to the board. What the hell is going on in this infrastructure? So they're a key buyer. So cloud, security. Now actually we get to developers. I believe for our company, they're typically an important and critical stakeholder. What does that mean? Imagine an enterprise, I've got 40 teams using this common cloud infrastructure, but they have to fix the problems we find. This is what's new for the security people. The security teams don't get to be overlords. We see, we fix, we control. Right. No, they're orchestrators. We actually see, we understand, we're responsible for it, but those developers have to fix it in many instances. Now you can hold them accountable. So we help everybody collaborate, orchestrate between these different teams, so they're a key stakeholder. In a big enterprise, there's a couple of other stakeholders. Like in a big financial institution, the identity team actually is getting increasingly involved, and sometimes the audit teams. But as you get into a smaller enterprise, there's really 3. Buyer security, buyer cloud, critical stakeholder to developers.
That's interesting. And I'm guessing sector-wise, it's probably equally applicable. Like it's not in the old days where you'd say banks buy this, but others don't. I'm guessing the sector probably doesn't really matter.
It's super interesting, the vertical. So the answer is yes, of course, it's horizontal. The real measure for us, for the type of company we are, the type of solutions we're solving, is typically scale.
Yeah.
There's like an axis of scale and sophistication. We love high scale, high sophisticated customers. They really appreciate what it is we're doing. But we're working hard actually to essentially add simplicity into our product to go into customers who are just less sophisticated and gradually bring them to this level of sophistication. But what's super interesting about it is financial institutions in general have been the caboose of cloud. I mean, they've been slow to cloud. Yeah. They're realizing now this is a big problem for their business. This has nothing to do with security. It's a problem because other innovators are happening. But I do still think actually financial institutions, when it comes to security, will in fact still be the innovators. And the reason is they come to cloud extremely directed, extremely knowledgeable. That's why we've some beautiful financial institutions as clients of ours at large scale, because they come and they're very directed. They really need the innovation, but they also know, I need to know that serverless function that was up for 90 seconds. I need to know what it could access. And I want to be able to vouch for every single one of them. Other enterprises aren't quite there yet, but they will all eventually get there. So I think financial institutions have not led in cloud. I think they are certainly driving the envelope in terms of how to secure cloud.
They're getting there now. Hey, yes. For companies that have some interest in learning more about your very fine company and platform, is the website the best?
The website is always the best way. So sonraisecurity.com, SONRAI security.com. Sonrai is actually a Gaelic word, and it means data.
Listen, again, I want to thank you on behalf of our team at Tag Cyber and also the folks who are watching. I want to thank you for stopping by.
Super pleasure. Thanks, Ed. It's great. Thanks for having me in this morning.
Very good. And for the rest of you watching, we'll see you next time.